The sun sets on the old crab boat. The captain empties his last traps. His oldest son picks up the floats. A tradition on the bay, perhaps. The sun comes up, the sun goes down. It happens every day in our small town.
All right, so today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to be exploring a collection of poems.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so this is Chestertown Revisited by Mark Tennyson Einstein. And what's interesting about this is that these poems were actually written back in 1991.
Oh, wow.
But he only revisited and published them during the pandemic in 2021.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and so that adds this whole other layer to it, right? Like looking back at your life, the places that shaped you. And the setting for these poems is really potent, too.
Okay.
But we're transported to the Chesapeake Bay region.
Okay.
Specifically Chestertown, Maryland, and the surrounding towns.
Gotcha.
And Einstein blends these personal stories with broader thoughts on life.
Okay.
All against this backdrop of waterman sailboats and that, small town kind of atmosphere.
Yeah, the foreword alone, I think, really kind of sets the scene beautifully.
Okay.
It doesn't just describe the Chesapeake Bay. It evokes its significance, It's this breathtaking waterway, this tapestry of rivers and streams, the nation's largest estuary.
Right.
But it's also so much more than that.
It's a way of life.
Exactly. It's a way of life.
Yeah.
And the foreword, I think, really emphasizes that how intertwined the people and the Bay are.
Right.
Their livelihoods, their traditions, it's all passed down through generations.
Exactly.
But there's also this really interesting tension between holding on to those roots and the inevitable changes that the region is facing.
Yeah, it's like the Bay itself,
Exactly.
Like constantly in motion.
Constantly in motion, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the poems really come in, that bring that tension to life.
Right.
Should we jump into Chestertown itself then?
Yeah, let's do it.
Poem number 1, simply titled Chestertown, seems like the perfect starting point.
Okay, yeah. Even the opening lines. The sun sets on the old crab boat. The captain empties his last traps.
Right.
It sets this tone of routine. It's like every day revolves around the Bay's rhythms.
Yeah, and notice the repetition, too.
Okay.
Bushel baskets on the bow. Bushel baskets on the stern. It's not just vivid imagery. It reinforces that sense of cyclical work.
Right.
How connected this community is to the water.
Yeah. And then there's that image of the woman waiting with a smile in Chestertown.
Oh, yeah.
It really highlights how everyone is involved, even indirectly.
Right.
And that image of the sun rising and setting, it reappears throughout the collection.
It does.
It's like a heartbeat for the town.
Exactly. But it's not just a static heartbeat, right? There's that undercurrent of change that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Even in the poems focused on childhood.
Okay.
Like numbers 4, 5, and 9. There are hints of things shifting.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because poem number 4, where the boys skip school to see the Orioles play, it has that carefree, rebellious spirit of youth. But then poem number 5, with its escape to Patapsco for a Baltimore kid, mentions the closed down mill.
Oh, yeah.
It's subtle.
Yeah.
But it's there.
It's there.
Yeah.
And I think that contrast is key to understanding this whole section.
Okay.
It's not just about celebrating childhood adventures.
Right.
It's about exploring how those experiences shape us even as the world around us changes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. It's like Einstein is suggesting that even as places transform, the essence of those memories, that connection to a particular time and place remains
with you.
Yes.
Wow, that's a great point.
And it makes those seemingly simple poems about hitching a ride on a bus or skipping school feel so much more layered.
Yes.
It makes you wonder if Einstein, when revisiting these poems years later, saw those early hints of change as foreshadowing.
Yeah.
The massive shifts he was experiencing during the pandemic.
It's definitely something to consider.
Right.
And it makes the transition into the next section, which deals with more mature themes of love, loss, and reflection, even more intriguing.
Yeah, what didn't you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we're moving through life stages alongside the poet.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see how these youthful experiences shape the way he approaches those bigger questions.
Let's delve into those more complex emotions then.
Okay.
Poems like numbers 12, 13, and 16 are particularly raw, exploring the complexities of relationships and those lingering memories that stick with you long after a love has faded.
Poem number 13 about Karen really struck me.
Oh, yeah.
That line, Karen was a teacher of the heart, though teachers and their students often part, is such a poignant reflection on how certain people leave an indelible mark on us, even if those relationships end.
It's true.
It makes you think about the lasting impact our connections have on who we become.
And it contrasts so sharply with the lightheartedness of those earlier poems.
Yes.
It's a reminder that life isn't all carefree adventures.
Right.
There's heartache and loss, too.
And poem number 16 captures that sense of loss so powerfully.
Yeah.
The image of a man sitting in a bar, his wife beside him, breaking the news of what the doctor said, as an unfamiliar tune plays on the jukebox. It's just heart-wrenching.
It's in those specific details that the emotional weight really hits you.
Right.
We don't need a long explanation of the man's feelings.
Exactly.
Imagery does all the work.
And it makes the transition to poems 23 and 24 about a husband at his dying wife's bedside even more impactful.
It does.
The rawness of those poems, the regrets, the tenderness, it's just palpable.
I think what makes those poems so powerful is that they don't shy away from the messy reality of grief.
Right.
There's anger, confusion, and a deep sense of longing, all mixed with love.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even in our darkest moments, love can still shine through.
And knowing that Einstein revisited these poems during the pandemic, a time of immense loss for so many, adds another layer of complexity.
Yeah.
It's like he's offering a space for us to confront our own mortality and grapple with the things that truly matter.
And it's not just about confronting death.
Right.
It's also about celebrating life.
Okay.
Shall we explore how Einstein does that in the next section?
Let's do it.
I'm particularly drawn to the poems that celebrate the Bay and its people.
Okay.
There's a vibrancy there, a sense of joy that feels like a direct response to those heavier themes we've just explored.
I'm ready for a little bit of that Chesapeake sunshine after those last few poems.
Well, on that point, poem number 20 is certainly a good place to start.
Okay.
It's pure romance.
Yeah.
A couple under the stars enjoying their moonlight serenade.
I love the image of the night wind playing the boat's rigging as if it were an antique violin.
Oh, yeah.
It's like nature itself is participating in their love story.
And that speaks to a larger theme that runs through this section.
Okay.
The interconnectedness of humans and nature.
Yeah.
It's not just about pretty scenery.
Right.
It's about how the Bay shapes the lives and experiences of the people who live there.
Absolutely. And we see that in poem number 21, too, with its depiction of the skipjack races in Tilkman.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just a sporting event.
Right.
It's a celebration of maritime tradition, a reminder of the Bay's heritage.
And it's about community, wouldn't you say?
Oh, for sure.
The way everyone gathers to witness the races, to cheer on their favorites.
Yes.
It speaks to a shared passion that unites them.
Yeah, kind of like those lively characters in poem number 46.
Oh, yes.
Hanging out at the Swamp Circle Fun.
That one's great.
Oh, that one is a gem.
Yeah.
It's like stepping into a time capsule of Chesapeake Bay culture.
Totally.
The girl who leaves with the first person who looks at her, right? The old man in a bow tie talking to himself.
Yeah.
Einstein captures those quirky details with such warmth and humor.
He doesn't just describe the scene. He makes you feel like you're right there in the middle of it.
Yes.
Soaking up the atmosphere.
And amid all the laughter and revelry, there's this underlying sense of longing.
There is.
In some of these poems. Like in poem number 47, which expresses this yearning for the eastern shore.
Right.
This desire to return to a place of belonging.
Yeah, it resonates with anyone who feels a strong connection to a particular place, that pull to return to your roots.
Yes. And then there's poem number 33, which celebrates the simple pleasure of cooking crabs on a sailboat.
Oh, I love that one.
Oh, it's so evocative.
Yeah.
You can practically smell the crabs steaming and feel the gentle rocking of the boat.
You're right there.
Gently now we lay at anchor, rocking on our little sailing yacht. I light a burner on the stove and pour a can of beer into the pot.
Yeah.
Like a sensory meditation.
It is.
On the joys of life on the Bay.
And it serves as a nice transition to poem number 34, Patriot.
Yes.
Which, unlike the others, tells a more complete story.
This is one of my favorites.
Oh, good.
It's the story of a man who rescues and restores a dilapidated sailboat.
Okay.
Names it Patriot, and then ultimately decides to sell it.
Oh, wow.
It's bittersweet.
Yeah.
But also incredibly heartwarming.
There's so much symbolism packed into that name, Patriot.
Right.
It speaks to a love of country, a connection to history, and a pride in craftsmanship.
And the poem takes us on this journey with the man.
It does.
From finding the boat, a broken hull with no boom or mast, to the painstaking restoration process, to the adventures they share on the Delaware River.
Yeah, and then that final moment of letting go, I made you a sailing ship and you made me a captain.
Oh, yeah.
It's a recognition that sometimes the things we love most are meant to be shared, that holding on too tightly can stifle growth.
It's also a reminder that even as things change, the memories and lessons we learn along the way stay with us.
And that leads us perfectly to poem number 55, which explores this idea of change on a larger scale. It's a lament for a bygone era. Specifically the town of Betterton, which seems to be fading away.
Oh, yeah.
The boardwalk is gone. The arcade is gone. It's just a condo ghost town with tumbleweed memories.
It's heartbreaking, but also a stark reminder of how progress can sometimes come at a cost.
It is.
It ties back to that tension we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
That push and pull between tradition and change that defines the Chesapeake Bay region.
Exactly. It's a tension that many coastal communities are facing.
Right.
But even as things change, there's a glimmer of hope.
Like in poem number 57.
Yes.
Which reminds us that we have a responsibility to care for the bay and for each other.
That's right.
We, the users, the protectors of the bay, have yet a bit of work for us in store.
It's a call to action.
Yeah.
A reminder that we have the power to shape the future.
And that perhaps the best way to honor the past is to ensure that the beauty and spirit of the bay endure for generations to come.
Beautifully put.
Yeah.
It seems like we've reached a natural stopping point for now. We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
From childhood adventures to romantic interludes.
Yes.
To reflections on loss and change.
Yeah. But we're not done yet.
We're not.
There's still so much to uncover in Chestertown Revisited.
There is.
And I'm eager to explore how Einstein continues to grapple with these big questions in the remaining poems.
We'll dive back in soon to unravel those final threads. And see what other gems of wisdom we can find.
All right, sounds good.
Until then, keep those sails full and your hearts open to the beauty that surrounds you.
I like that.
All right.
Okay. So we left off talking about the tension between tradition and change in Einstein's poems.
Yeah.
It's like he's constantly looking for that balance between honoring the past and embracing the future. Especially when it comes to the Chesapeake Bay.
That's a great observation, and I think it ties directly into this next set of poems we're going to explore. They delve into some pretty introspective territory. Ideas about death, the meaning of life, and the role of human connection.
Okay, so a bit heavier than those carefree childhood scenes, or even the romantic ones on the bay.
Right.
But I'm ready to see where Einstein takes us.
Well, poem number 28 certainly doesn't shy away from difficult topics. It tackles the idea of death head on.
I remember that one.
Yeah.
It felt almost like a philosophical argument, but one that was surprisingly grounded in sensory details.
Exactly. He personifies death as this force that doesn't care about time or circumstance.
Right.
Celebrating his life at man's expense.
Yeah.
But the poem isn't just about fear or resignation. There's this undercurrent of defiance, a reminder that even though death is inevitable, we can still face it with courage and dignity.
That line sticks with me.
Which one?
Of death, no portrait ever has been painted.
Yeah.
Yet with death, no man can say he's unacquainted.
Yeah.
It's like he's saying that even though we don't fully understand death, we all have this innate connection to it, this shared experience that binds us as humans.
It's a powerful concept.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about how Einstein, revisiting these poems in his 70s, must have been wrestling with his own mortality.
Yeah.
The pandemic likely amplified those thoughts for many people.
Yeah, for sure.
Making us confront our own fragility.
Absolutely. But, like you said, the poem isn't just about dwelling on death.
Right.
It's also about celebrating life.
Yes.
And poem number 39 captures that beautifully with its depiction of love's transformative power.
Yes. It's a complete shift in tone.
Yeah.
The imagery is vibrant, full of light and renewal. The speaker describes feeling revitalized, their senses heightened. Almost as if love has breathed new life into them.
Wow.
I opened up my arms to greet the light and noticed how the sunshine hit the shades. I laughed that I'd regained my appetite.
It's a beautiful way to describe that feeling of falling in love, of seeing the world anew. It reminds me of that Shakespeare quote, "And summer's lease have all too short a date."
Oh, yeah.
Love has a way of making us feel more alive, more connected to the world around us.
And speaking of connection, poem number 45 explores that theme from a different angle.
Okay.
It looks at the unique perspective of a sailor at sea.
I remember that line. Rarely does a sailor think about man's reality when his hand is on the wheel and his eye is on the sea.
Yeah.
It speaks to the sense of freedom and escape that sailing offers. The way it can transport you beyond the everyday worries of life.
It's almost a meditative state, isn't it?
Yeah?
The sailor becomes one with the elements focused on the task at hand,
Yeah.
connected to something larger than themselves.
But that doesn't mean forgetting where they come from.
Right.
Many of these poems emphasize the importance of roots,
Yes.
of recognizing where you belong.
Yeah.
It's like Einstein is trying to reconcile those seemingly opposing forces. The desire for freedom and exploration versus the need for connection and belonging.
Right. And that tension comes to a head in poem number 58,
Okay.
which brings the collection full circle back to Chestertown.
Yeah.
It feels like a resolution of sorts, a recognition that you can embrace both the vastness of the world and the intimacy of your own community.
I love the imagery in that poem.
Yeah.
The Cairn Hall,
Ah.
the old crab boat heading out to sea at sunrise, a new generation at the helm.
Yeah.
At sunrise, and the old crab boat begins another day.
All right.
The oldest son is at the wheel and guides her on her way.
Beautiful.
It feels hopeful,
It does.
like a passing of the torch that ensures the legacy of Chestertown will live on.
It's a beautiful ending, isn't it?
It is.
But I wouldn't say it's a neat and tidy resolution.
Right.
There's still that sense of melancholy, that awareness of time passing, things changing.
Yeah.
But there's also a recognition that change is inevitable, and that finding beauty and meaning within that change is part of what makes life worth living.
I agree. It's not about clinging to the past.
Right.
It's about carrying the essence of what matters forward into the future.
Exactly. And perhaps that's the most profound message Einstein is conveying,
Yeah.
that even as the world around us transforms, there's something enduring about the human spirit.
Okay.
Our capacity for love, connection, and resilience.
Yeah.
Those are the things that ultimately ground us,
Right.
that give us a sense of purpose and meaning no matter what challenges we face.
Beautifully said.
Yeah,
I feel like we've just scratched the surface of these poems,
me too.
but I'm already seeing them in a new light.
It's amazing how a single collection of poems can hold so much depth and complexity.
We've still got some more ground to cover.
We do.
There are a few poems we haven't touched on yet,
Okay.
and I'm curious to see how they fit into the larger themes we've been discussing.
I'm ready to dive back in. Who knows what other treasures we'll uncover?
Wow. We've explored some pretty profound ideas in these poems, haven't we?
We have.
From facing death to celebrating love to finding our place in a world that's constantly changing. It's like Einstein is giving us a framework
Yeah,
for navigating life's biggest questions.
it's true. These poems offer a lot to unpack, and I think what makes them so compelling
Yeah.
is that they're not just abstract musings,
No,
they're rooted in very specific details in the sights and sounds
Yes.
and experiences of life on the Chesapeake Bay.
It's that blend of the personal and the universal that really resonates.
Yeah, I think so.
Like we can connect with those specific images, the crab boats, the sailboats, the little towns,
Right.
but we can also see our own lives reflected
Yeah.
in the bigger themes he's exploring.
And the fact that he wrote these poems 30 years apart
Yeah,
adds another layer of depth.
it does.
It's like he's having a conversation with his younger self,
Right.
reflecting on how those early experiences shaped the person he became.
Especially when you consider the context of the pandemic,
Yeah,
revisiting these poems during such a tumultuous time must have given them new meaning.
absolutely. There's a sense of urgency in some of these poems,
Yeah.
a call to action that feels particularly relevant now.
Like in poem number 57, where he talks about the responsibility we have to protect the bay.
Mm-hmm.
We, the users, the protectors of the bay, have yet a bit of work for us in store.
Yeah,
It's not just about environmentalism.
right.
It's about recognizing our interconnectedness,
Mm-hmm.
how our actions impact the world around us.
And it's not just about the bay, is it? It's
Yeah.
about taking responsibility for our communities, for the people we love,
Yes,
for the future we're creating.
exactly. And that brings us back to that tension
Yeah.
between tradition and change.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about clinging to the past.
Right.
It's about learning from it, carrying forward the values and traditions that matter,
Yeah.
while also being open to new ways of thinking and being.
It's a delicate balance, for sure.
It is.
But I think Einstein shows us that it's possible.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the most powerful takeaway from Chestertown Revisited.
Okay.
It's not a set of answers.
Right.
It's an invitation to engage with these big questions, to find our own meaning and purpose in a world that's constantly evolving.
And to find beauty in the everyday.
Yeah.
In the simple moments that make up a life. Like in that poem about cooking crabs on a sailboat.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a grand gesture.
Right.
But it captures something essential about the Chesapeake Bay, about finding joy in this simple act of being present.
And that's a powerful message, especially in a world that often feels chaotic and overwhelming.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Chestertown Revisited, we want to leave you with a thought to ponder.
Okay.
How do these poems written decades ago speak to the challenges and opportunities we face today?
Yeah.
What lessons can we glean from Einstein's reflections on life loss and the enduring spirit of the Chesapeake Bay?
We encourage you to explore these poems for yourselves, to discover the connections that resonate most deeply with your own experiences. And as always, keep seeking out those hidden gems of knowledge and inspiration that make life so rich and rewarding.
The youngest son, he watches hard. He still has so much left to learn. As the sun comes up, the sun goes down. It happens every day in our small town. The sun comes up, the sun goes down. It happens every day in Rock Hall Town. A woman in her kitchen cooking waits with a smile in her small town. She walks by the waterfront window looking as the crab boat ties to the piles in the ground. The sun comes up, the sun goes down. It happens every day in our small town. The sun comes up, the sun goes down. It happens every day in Rock Hall Town. A day is done in our small town. A father says goodnight. Tomorrow he'll be on the bay before the morning light. It's sunrise and the old crab boat begins another day. The oldest son is at the wheel and guides her on her way. The youngest son is at his side, prepared to lend a hand. It's the busy season of the year, the peak time of demand. As the sun comes up, the sun goes down. It happens every day in our small town. The sun comes up, the sun goes down. It happens every day in Rock Hall Town. The old retired captain watches with a smile in his small town. The crab boat departs once more, heading outward bound. As the sun comes up, the sun goes down. It happens every day in our small town. The sun comes up, the sun goes down. It happens every day in Rock Hall Town. Another day in our small town. The captain greets the sun. He smells the southwest wind and knows the crabs are on the run.